So Norman, you talk about improving hiring processes there as a sort of a positive impact of being forced into that position almost. It'd be great to learn a little bit more about what you see as better hiring when you talk about reducing the cognitive load, as you put it. How have you sought to grease the cogs of hiring to increase the velocity of the hires you're making?
I'd say probably one of the key differences was a change in mindset around what we're actually doing here.
Yeah.
And the focus I try to bring when it comes to hiring is that this is all about a candidate experience. You try to work in a great candidate experience so that anyone that is interviewing with you, whether they got the job or not, they were like, that was a really enjoyable process to go through.
Yeah.
When you shift to that mindset, what you can actually find when you analyze existing systems that people have in place is that their hiring systems are normally designed to prove that candidates aren't capable to join your organization. They have all these stages where, well, they didn't pass there or they didn't pass there, so they don't hit this imaginary bar that we have. So when you shift it to a positive candidate experience, you then think of it more holistically and say, right, well, these are actually all the steps that we want them to go through. We don't want them to just do a coding test at the start, maybe not pass that hurdle and then never hear from us again. That's never going to be a good experience for them. So if we commit to giving them the opportunity to try lots of different ways to demonstrate their strengths and capabilities, and at the end, the intent is that they will have had a positive experience regardless. And if you do that well, going through each of those stages and collecting the data as you go in a consistent way, you should, at the end of it, have a very decent set of data to give back to the candidate and say, well, these are the areas we thought you were clearly awesome. These are the areas that, we would encourage you to look at for future development. And maybe these are the areas that maybe might not even be on your radar that would be very important to us, and we would encourage you to have a think about that.
One of my observations about the Malaysia market is not enough attention goes onto the feedback cycle. It sounds like you've really put a lot of emphasis on that. Could you talk to us a little bit about where you see the benefits of that from your perspective?
When you're trying to project yourself to the market, you always want to be a desirable place to come work. And I think anyone who's ever interviewed for a job where they've went through a series of steps and never heard anything back, that doesn't leave you with a very pleasant feeling about that organization.
Of course.
If you believe that people who may not be right today but could be right tomorrow or a couple of years down the line, you want to make sure that they're not disenfranchised from applying to your organization.
Of course, because people are on a journey themselves. In 2 years, they could be spot on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's a finite community.
Yeah.
You talk about data as a key component of the hiring process as well. It'd be good to understand a little bit more about what you see as the role of data when it comes to good hiring practices.
At the very least, you should be able to be able to clearly articulate the job that you're hiring somebody for, and then how you would measure somebody being successful in that role. And you need to build your interview experience around measuring those criteria.
Absolutely.
So if you do that in a consistent way, it means at the end of the process, if you've looked at 5 different candidates, you've got objective measures. You can say candidate 1 versus candidate 2, strengths and weaknesses. You can make a more objective decision based on the data you've collected through that process.
Awesome. It's about objectivity.
Yeah, absolutely. Wherever possible, I've found that you get significantly improved hiring outcomes. The more subjectivity you remove, the greater objectivity you introduce.
And of course, those data points can be used throughout the candidate journey, let's say, once they join.
Yeah, so as soon as you're past candidate experience and you have a successful candidate, they move into employee experience. And again, the gold standard is if you do it correctly and you can collect good data, on day one, you have an assessment of where this candidate is and where they might need to develop and grow from there. You don't. A lot of companies might spend the next 3 to 6 months trying to really get to know the candidate and then coming up with what a career development plan might look like.
Extrapolating that a little bit in terms of candidate journey post-joining, if we're talking about engagement, one of the big challenges facing Malaysia right now is retention. Now, if we're talking about a starting point as the hiring experience, the relevance of those data points post that, I'd be really interested to hear a little bit more about what does good look like when it comes to retaining and using those data points to drive retention across the whole candidate journey.
We've done quite a lot of work, especially when I was in Australia, trying to understand the sort of different shapes and profiles of technology people, really. And you find that people at different stages in their lives want and need different things. So it's really about, what information can you gather at the start to give you a head start on what program of work you might put them into to retain them. And, for example, with graduates, they're a very different profile to somebody like myself who's been, doing this sort of stuff for 25 years, and a graduate just wants to learn and consume, and just you throw them interesting challenges. That's a very deliberate sort of onboarding experience and development plan you can put in place for them.
Yeah.
Versus somebody who might maybe be a bit more seasoned in their career and looking for specific niche areas that they want to grow. They kind of feel like they've filled out the palette a bit, and this is an area they want to focus on. So, individuals are all different in organizations, what they want and need, but when you start with that base level of information, you can work out from there where to go.
Absolutely, and given your tenure within certain businesses, you've been able to see that flourish. I mean, I imagine being able to hire people on day dot as graduates, and then seeing them through, move through into higher ranks. So you've actually seen this in practice.
So one of the things I'm really proud of we did in Australia was we started, the company I was at, we started the grad program. And I believe we're still at 100% retention on all of our grads. Like all the ones that have joined, none of them have left, I think.
Yeah.
And we are now at the point where some of our year one grads are moving into senior leadership positions. They're responsible for teams of engineers, and that's fantastic.
There's so many reciprocal benefits of a good grad program because it breeds loyalty, right?
Yeah.
Fantastic. So, I mean, looking at data as a theme, I suppose one of the other related themes we're seeing is maybe more automation. If there's so much reliance on data, if data tells us everything we need to know, what do you think the relationship between that and sort of automating the hiring process is? And also, do you think that there's a line that we shouldn't go past when it comes to automation versus this human judgment aspect?
A lot of it's really got to do with scale. Are you hiring 10 or are you hiring 1,000? I would say, generally over the entire recruitment, onboarding, and then career process, there are lots of parts of that process that are maybe very repeatable, low value for a human to be doing. And there's lots of tools, products coming on the market that can sort of take care of those tasks. And they're great. It means that the people that you've got aren't working on, just repetitive filling in forms. They can move on to higher order things. So I think automation plays a key part in dealing with those items. Also, there's a lot more tools now starting to get a bit better at taking some of the data that's collected and predicting or giving you indications of where you might want to make decisions. But I think the key thing there is that they're assisting in decision making. They're not making decisions.
Yeah.
Look, I believe in, and I could look at this 10 years from now and be proven completely wrong, but I think when you are hiring people to work with people in a company, there's always got to be a human element. As a candidate and having a positive candidate experience, I would say one of the key components of that is feeling connected to the company that you are potentially going to go work with.
Yeah.
I think there's always going to be an essential human component, but I think that that'll just move higher up the value chain.
Just to close that point, you talk about the human connection there and how important that might be. What does the good human engagement side consist of, would you say, as an example or a couple of examples?
We experimented and tried a few different things when we were playing around with different hiring processes, and one of the things we played with was the first step being, it has to be a phone call. I think previously we had, the first step was maybe answer these 3 questions or possibly even do this coding challenge.
Yeah.
If we really believe that positive candidate experience was core, then probably the first thing you want as a human being is to connect with another human being and build a better understanding of what this thing is.
Yeah.
So, when we were looking at designing our hiring system, we realized that we'd optimized it in a certain way where there was a lot of automated steps at the start. There was, questions you had to answer online. There was maybe a coding test you had to do. But when we, reevaluated it and thought about, well, is this a positive candidate experience? We realized we were getting quite far in before there was any sort of connection with a human.
Yeah.
So we changed that and we started introducing, conversations much earlier in the process so that we could give that sense of connection. Further down the recruitment process, we also looked at dedicated sessions. It was really, it had nothing to do with technology. It was all about the individual, their beliefs, their values, situations they'd been in, and that really helps you build a good understanding of them and allows them to ask a lot of questions around you and the organization and the things that you believe. So we feel that we managed to get that blend of technical and automatable with human components peppered throughout it to build the whole picture.
Fantastic. No, that makes sense.
You're actually narrowing yourself to a very small set of people.
Yeah.
And you might artificially give yourself the idea that there's not available talent in the market, which I don't believe is true.